So let me go ahead and get started. And anybody who shows up too late, it's their fault. So welcome to day 2 of our successful backyard birdhouses talk. So I want to just go ahead and launch right in before we get started. Of course, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in chat. Just like last week, Georgette Howington is here and ready to answer your questions in chat. And we'll go ahead, if she can answer them quickly, she'll go ahead and do that. And if she is not able to, or she wants to do it more of a live, she'll just say, we'll answer that question live, and then we'll talk about it at the end of the presentation. So I mentioned last time how important it was to have species-specific placement. So I wanted to talk about the different things that make for a successful nest box. And one of the most important is knowing what kind of species you have in the area and tailoring your nest box and its placement to that. So we'll talk more about the species specific placement for the different species that we have here in the Bay Area. I'll get more into that later on. Okay. Another thing that we need for success is clear entry. So what I mean by that is that sometimes people go ahead and they put a nest box up, and then things grow up. You know, they put it in a plant and or a tree or something like that, and it was great when they started, but eventually the leaves kind of got started occluding the entrance. So you want to keep in mind that you don't want that to happen. You want to kind of keep, unless you want to visit it. And one of the first things you're going to do when you go back at the start of the year, which is basically right now because the season is about to start, you're going to be looking to make sure that they have a nice, easy way of getting in and out. But it's even more important than that, because I mentioned before just how important it is that they avoid predators. And unfortunately, I think I'm not, if you go ahead and put I think it's just go ahead and mute everybody and then I'll unmute. Okay. Unmute. Okay, here we go. So anyway, it's important that they avoid predators, and the problem is that a lot of times if you've got a nest box that has foliage all around it, it can be easy for a predator to hide and jump out right at the last minute, right as the bird is trying to come up and approach. And not only do you lose the adult, but you're going to lose the babies inside, because either the parent that survives might be able to keep them all going, but you're certainly going to be losing more birds. So basically losing a parent is really a bad thing. So when you set up the nest box, make sure that it's easy for them to see around the nest box, so that they can see that there is something hiding there. And it's easier to hide as a predator than you would think. So basically just keep things away so that even if there is a predator waiting there, they have a little bit of room to when they come in, so that the bird can try and evade. So anyway, there you go. Clear entry. Let's see. Next, let's talk about how to mount the box. Now there's 4 different ways, for the most part, that you can mount a nest box. You can use a pole, a post, a tree, or mount it on a hanging nest box. And I'll talk a little bit about each one. First of all, I want to talk about hanging nest boxes. Now, in California, hanging nest boxes are actually a pretty good, safe alternative. as far as safety goes for the birds, because they have I'm going to go ahead and play this video right here. They have um, we don't really have tree climbing snakes in California. That's not absolutely true, because the gopher snake has been known to climb up into the trees and come down and go into the nest box, but that's actually pretty rare. Unfortunately, in other states like Louisiana, it's really common, which means that you are essentially just putting up a popcorn feeder for the predators, the local predators, especially the snakes. But in California, that's not really a problem. So if you're watching me use a lifter to put the nest box back up. Unfortunately, I tried to go in from the wrong side, but there you go. So what you're going to do when you take the nest box down, you want to remember which branch you got it off of. It's not a problem if there's no nest in there, but if you got a nest, you want it pretty much to go back right where you got it. So hanging nest boxes, and I showed you my hanging nest box last week. So if you notice this this wire right here, this wire hangs around a branch and holds it up in the air, and that's good. You want to have a relatively strong branch so it doesn't blow off in the wind or something like that. The pros, like I said, in California, it's safe compared to other methods of nest box. And another pro is that it discourages vandalism. The reason I say that is because in my my nest box trail up at Ed Levin County Park, I have several different situations. One of them is a trail that really doesn't get much in the way of kids that are unsupervised. So if there are kids walking along the trail, there's usually a parent there with them to keep them away from the nest boxes. But in a picnic area where the kids are just running around playing, unfortunately, if there's a nest box within reach, they're going to make trouble. And so it's nice to have it up out of the way. A lot of times they don't even notice it, but when they do notice it, other than maybe throwing rocks at it, with hopefully they won't do, but they really can't get it. You know, hopefully they're not going to climb up in the tree. It doesn't seem like I've been having problems with that. So anyway, so it discourages vandalism. The next a pro is it's easy to move around. So one of the things about when you have a predator that has hit the nest box, and the easiest way to prevent that again is to simply move the nest box. I'll talk about how to move the nest box with when you have all the other mounting methods, but it's easy with a hanging nest box. You literally take it off of this branch and put it on that branch over there. And if you look now, you see that Huey here has you can see actually his nest box lifter right there, made of wire. Lifters can be kind of heavy. So when they first started making them, they made them out of wood. And in order to make them lighter, we take big patches of wood out of them. So when you make the lifter, you want to make it as light as possible. And using wire like that is what most people are doing nowadays. There are retriever instructions on how to make them. That's one of them right there. I've got more clues on that coming up. But one of the cons is you will require a retriever and a good balanced nest box. And what I mean by that is that nest boxes, those nests are actually kind of heavy. And it's possible sometimes when you lift up the nest box that it ends up tilting. It may tilt forward, it may tilt backward based on where the center of gravity is. So you want to make sure your nest box is nice and balanced right in the center. So building the nest box is, I'm not going to say tricky, but it does take a lot of care. And again, I have more information about that, but that's one of the concerns if you're thinking about doing a nest box. Another one is that those nest boxes are kind of heavy, and you have to have a certain amount of upper body strength in order to pull them off of the tree. Now, what they do at McClellan Ranch and many other places is they simply put them lower. They don't put them really, really high. I have some that are so high that it literally takes my lifter, the pole, all the way at the very end of, so it's like 17 feet in the air. And so it takes quite a bit of power in order to pull it off. But you don't have to do that. You can put it more like 12 feet off the ground, and it's not that hard to get off, and it's still relatively safe. So you need, so that's one thing. And another thing is, I should go back here. Another thing is that you need to carry that lifter around with you. And that could be kind of a good thing. It could be a bad thing. For Beverly, I think she was saying that it's actually a conversation starter for her, where she actually has people approach her and say, "What's that thing?" And she's able to bring them in and give them the whole lesson on what she's doing. This right here is a little circular that our friend Lee Pauser put together. You can find it at that website right there if you want to take a snapshot, a screenshot. It's basically I think it's 12 pages, but he gives the plans on how to make the nest box in that. Actually, it's this nest box right here, and it's a great nest box. So he tells you exactly how to make that nest box and stuff like that. So if you're interested in building a hanging nest box, this is the circular for you, and it's available at that website. So this is a post-mounted nest box. And so you've seen this picture before, you saw it last week. Post-mounted nest boxes are easy to install. And remember I said that moving a nest box is beneficial sometimes if it's been hit by a snake or something like that. That predator is now educated and it knows right where to go for a snack in a couple of weeks. So you don't want them to and they're not that bright. If you're able to move it, a lot of times it kind of resets things. So all you have to do is to use a screw gun, the battery operated drill, and you're able to sink in the screws and put it up and unsink the screws and take it down and move it. So putting on a post is easy to do. And if you got posts, especially, and other methods may not be possible. For example, at 11, I can't use poles. Now I can use the hanging nest boxes, and I do. But you know, if I want, I like being able to carry the pole around and do the hanging nest boxes in the picnic area, and then being able to leave that pole in the car when I'm walking around doing all the rest of them. So it's nice having them, you know, down lower where I can get to them. And it's nice being able to have it on the post. The problem is that I can't put a pole up because a pole is considered development. And that means I need to go through all kinds of CEQA approvals, which means literally posting all over the place. We're going to be developing by putting up these poles. Do you have any objections? Stuff like that. And it takes a while. So I could do it, but it's just kind of a hassle. And then if I end up having to move it, then I need to go through the whole thing all over again. So posts have their good points. Unfortunately, they are very easy to predate. They're easy for the snakes to climb the posts. They're easy for raccoons and squirrels and rats or whatever to get up those posts. They're easy to get in there. And so unfortunately, that's a drawback. So you have to kind of decide which way you're going to go. And so that's why it's good that you're able to move it so easily, because unfortunately, predation is a real concern in a place like that. And then on a tree. Now, having a post on a tree posted on a tree, nest box posted on a tree, it might be the only option. For example, you can't put in a pole and there are no posts. So there may be cases where you simply couldn't put it in. Now, I told you about silence.org last week, and this is what Bette Zimmerman wrote about tree mounted nest boxes. Is it a nest box or is it a mouse house raccoon feeder? She obviously doesn't care for them. But on the other hand, they may be, like I said, your only option. And then some species actually prefer it. I mentioned to you about, or the white-breasted nuthatch, I mentioned that they like privacy, which means that they don't like to fly out. They want to be able to sneak into their nest box. And that's why having it right up against the trunk is a great thing for them. That's what they want. Now, you don't have to have them on the trunk, but if you don't have them on the trunk, you have to have them near the trunk. So you can have a hanging nest box and have it within a couple of feet of the trunk, and that has worked for us. But what doesn't work is having it a lot further out. And then they're easy to install, just like the posts. You just zip, zip, zip with a drill gun, and you're able to put them up and take them down. Again, they're easy to predate, just like the posts are. In fact, they're even easier to predate. So that's a drawback for sure. Now, if you were to go across the country and be Johnny Nestbox, like Johnny Appleseed, if you're going to be Johnny Nestbox and run around and try and put nest boxes everywhere, and you wanted the safest method, it would be the pole-mounted nest box. So they're not that hard to install. If you look here, you see that this is a kind of a two-parter here. You've got a slightly bigger piece of conduit and a slightly smaller piece of conduit, and one is fit inside the other, and then you have a drilled hole, and then they put a screw in order to hold it there. And if somebody comes up who's really short that wants to go and pull it down, they can actually unscrew it and drop the pole down so they can reach the nest box and get to it. Okay. Like I said, they're safe relatively from snakes and things like that. Now, snakes can't go up those poles, so they're not perfectly safe. However, there are things you can do to mitigate that. We'll talk about that. They're the pros if they're not limited to existing infrastructure. So, for example, you're not relying on a post to be there. You're not relying on a tree to be there. You can put it here. You can put it over there. You can pretty much put it wherever you think they ought to be. So that's good. And then they require more work than other methods to install. In other words, once you have the hanging nest box built, it's easy to move it from here to there. And it's easy to move it from a post-mounted nest box. But with a pole-mounted nest box, if you got to move it, it's a bit of work. So that's another disadvantage. And it may require more approvals, like I said. In my park, it does require more approvals. Pole-mounted nest box you can actually do some things that make it safer. Now, I mentioned the knoll guard and the stovepipe baffle last week. And so you can put both of them on a pole-mounted nest box, and that really makes it safe. So that's a good thing. These are the instructions for it, and they're easy to find on the internet. If you look up knoll guard or a stovepipe baffle, this literally is the instructions on how to do both of them. And so just go ahead and look them up on the internet, and they're easy to find. In fact, if you want to take a screenshot of this, you will see that at the bottom there, I have the link to this illustration right there. Okay. And then recommended box mounting method. If you look on the back there, you can see a couple different ways that they've used to mount the nest box to the pole. So on the upper end, they actually used a carriage bolt and just drilled right through it. On the lower end, they actually used a U bolt or a U-shaped clamp that they put and mounted that way. And that's how they were able to mount the pole in the nest box. Let's talk about some challenges that the bluebirds and the other cavity nesting birds have, and they are house sparrows and European starlings. That this is two of them. House sparrows were actually both of these birds were introduced from Britain back. I think it's Britain. Maybe it was Europe for sure. Um, they were introduced because they were mentioned in William Shakespeare's plays. And for some reason, somebody decided in the 1900s that they wanted to have all of Shakespeare's birds living in the United States, so they could look out and see them. The only two that really survived were the European starling and the house sparrow. They were introduced. They're vicious, which means that they'll actually kill adult native birds, which is surprising for a house sparrow. It's not that big, but they're bad. They'll kill the babies for sure. They're very jealous, and they are the only birds that are legal to kill in the United States, that are not part of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act is an act that protects native birds, but you can destroy house sparrow nests and starling nests because they're such a pain. And Another thing is that let's talk about the European starling. It requires a 2-inch hole, and most of the nest boxes that we put up require only a 1.5-inch or smaller hole, and that is good because that means that we don't have to worry about the starling getting into our bluebird nest box as long as we maintain that hole. Now, woodpeckers will try and open it up, and we have to make sure and not let that happen. So when we come by and we check it each January, February, we want to make sure that if the woodpeckers open that hole, we have to do something about that. Put another piece of hole over it to close it back down to whatever size it is we need. The only real bird that is going directly head to head, as long as we keep those entrance holes small, is the purple martin. And we're working trying to help the purple martin, but they really have been devastated by going directly head to head with the European starling. The house sparrow, the thing about them is that they're very adaptable. They don't actually require nest boxes. They can use anything, like, for example, that light standard right there. So they are able to move in. The male moves in earlier than many of our native birds start. They move in early, and then the male will build a nest, bring in a female. They'll raise their young. Once the babies leave the nest, the female goes off with the babies, and the male will start over again and raise a whole new clutch. And he can do that like 4 times, which is a lot more than our native birds. Most of our native birds have 1 brood per year. Some have 2. Very rarely they have 3. You never see them have 4. And they're very aggressive nesters. They'll kill things. There are a lot of other predation, mortality events that our birds have to worry about. They have to worry about snakes and raccoons, jays and other birds, ants, and vandalism. Now, snakes will generally come in and they will eat everything in the nest box, and then they'll leave, and you come back and you find an empty nest box. The only way you knew that anything had happened was if you were doing the weekly monitoring that we ask you to do, because then, and I'll talk about that later on, but you know where in the cycle you should be. And you come back and you say, okay, I expect to find eggs. I expect to find young in here. You open it up and there's nothing there. That's generally the calling card of a snake. Raccoons, on the other hand, they destroy the nest box. They rip the lid right off of it. Jays and other birds just tend to leave dead, destruction. I found a female laying like this across her young, with a big hole in her chest. It's really, heartbreaking. Ants, obviously, you're going to find ants on the nest box, and obviously vandalism. A lot. I've actually found nest boxes that were beaten uh, with a baseball bat, and they were just in pieces. So now, 10 to 20% mortality from egg to fledge is not that uncommon. Hopefully, it's more like 10. If it's 20%, you might want to see if you can do something to bring that down. And unfortunately, if it's higher than that, then something, we got to do something to kind of change things up. But unfortunately for you, if you just have a nest box in your backyard, it's basically just rolling dice to see where that lands. 80% of the babies will, or the birds will die in their first year once they leave the nest. So it may be right after they leave. They're literally snapped up by a jay or something like that. That's happened. Or it may be sometime during the year, but the 80%, that's really bad, and that's why only 20% of the birds that are fledged actually survive that first year. But then they become the more experienced birds later on who are able to do it right, and they tend to be the ones that are able to survive for years and years. So it's the wild kingdom out there. The point is that we want to try and raise the number of birds that we have fledging so that we have more birds surviving that first year. Other things of natural mortality, finding dead birds in the nest box. The death of one or both parent is a real problem. And what you will generally find is when you come in at the end of the nesting brood, you'll find a dead 1 week old and a dead 2 week old, and or 3 or 4 different chicks that are all dead in different succession. So one's a little bit older than the next, and the next like that. And what's happened is the parent simply wasn't able to keep up. The one parent that was left, they tried, they weren't able to keep up, and so slowly, as the chicks get bigger, they need more food, and the one parent can't keep up with that. Another one is heat or cold. So you generally know if it's really hot, 100 degrees for an extended period of time, or very, very cold. Both of those have happened to us. Another one is rain, late season rain that goes for a few days. That really took care of a bunch of our tree swallows one year recently, because what happens is the insects just don't come out. It's hard to hunt. You can imagine having to hunt to find the insects. If the insects aren't there, that's a population crash, and that's a problem. And then, of course, not enough food for the babies. So population crashes for insects is a real problem. And when the birds lay their eggs, they're gambling what is going to happen in a month, because in a month is when they really need all those insects to be out there to feed. That's when their young are just about ready to fledge. They're big, they need a lot of food, and if the insect population isn't there, then it's all the real problems. So and then insecticides used nearby. If there are insecticides used nearby, you're going to lose the entire brood right there. So you come back, everything's fine. All of a sudden you open it up and all the babies are dead. Well, think about it. Somebody's going and they're spraying, and it doesn't really matter what they're spraying. They could be spraying herbicide. But if they're spraying it all over the insects that are being picked up, then the parent takes them back to and they feed them to all their babies, and their babies now have this horrible toxic stuff inside their bodies. It's going to kill them. So you end up losing the entire nest all at once. So this is my daughter several years ago. just a reminder that you can take your kids when you're going out, and they have a lot of fun doing this. Why do we ask you to weekly monitor your nest boxes during the nesting season? The reason is a couple of things. One is to discourage house sparrows. Now, house sparrows are horrible, and we don't want to encourage them. And in other rural areas, the way they deal with them is with a BB gun. But you don't want to do that, right? I mean, most of us certainly don't. We don't even want to handle young baby house sparrows, because that's just too. We don't like killing things. I certainly don't, and I understand why you wouldn't want to. So the easiest way to deal with that is to remove the nest and kill and deal with the eggs. I give them early flying lessons. So that's the easiest way to deal with it. And you can only do that really if you're checking every week. You're checking every week, then you find a house sparrow nest, which is actually a bowl. It looks like it's actually a weaver finch, and a weaver finch makes a basket as a nest. So you open it up, and this is the weirdest thing you've seen, because the grass literally goes all around the nest, and the eggs are beautiful. They're like little, and they're green. They have little brown speckles on them. They're beautiful eggs, but unfortunately, house sparrows, like I said, are vicious, and we don't want to encourage them. The other thing is to prevent predation. So, like I said, you're not going to be able to generally stop the snake from killing your young. You're not going to be able to prevent the raccoon from getting in there, or the cat, or whatever it is. But one thing you can do is prevent them from doing it the next time. So what you do is you move the box somewhere else. And the way you know that you've had predation is by knowing what was happening last week. I'll talk more about that. And then we do ask you to send in your data to us. So the California Bluebird Recovery Program saves the data. And what we end up doing is we use that data for scientific purposes. We use it to kind of gauge how we're doing, if we've got nest boxes monitored, and we're able to proudly talk about how many baby bluebirds and other birds we've been able to fledge. In my case, I'm able to know what odd birds we've been able to have. Like, for example, the Nuttall's woodpecker that moved into my nest box. I'm glad that I'm able to tell people about that. So there's a for Santa Clara County, you can let Carolyn know, and her email address is programs@scvas.org. Let her know that you would like to be on our email list, and we have an email list that once you're on it, then we'll let you know every time it's time to send in your data. We'll tell you how to do it, give you instructions and stuff like that. And so it's pretty easy. The photo here is from nestwatch.org, and we do recommend putting your information there also. They have their own program that you're able to go in and let them know where the nests that you had are, and they're able to use it for scientific purposes too. This is a data sheet. Now, this one's actually for American kestrels, but the point is that there are sheets that you can use when you take them out into the field, and you just write down what you're doing from box to box to box. You're able to let them know what you found. In this case, you're able to say what's going on with the kestrels, but you can find these data sheets easily online. We have them. I'll talk more about Hatch Graham, but they've got, I think, sample sheets in there too that you can copy and use. Or you can just take notes. That's what I do. Just take notes, and then later on I'll go and I'll put them in a spreadsheet. So this is a spreadsheet that I did one year. I just took a little photo in the middle there. Now, if you look up here where it says CBCH, the reason I did that is that stands for chestnut-backed chickadee. The chestnut-backed chickadee is a bird that generally starts a little bit early. They nest around oaks and things like that. And what I wrote up there is CBCHY. And the reason I wrote Y is that means I found young there. And then at the end there, I wrote CBCH6F, which means I fledged 6 young. The reason I knew that is because I came along and I've been following every week. And when I came back at the end of that last week, they were all gone. And there was a lot. I mean, it definitely looked like a used nest. And I knew that things had gone well. Now, was there a chance that a snake had come in at the last minute and gotten the chicks? Yeah, there is. But for the most part, if you're really keeping track of where everything is, you pretty much can bet for the most part that you succeeded in fledging 6 eggs. Now, further down here, I had the TRESBR. That's the tree swallow. And they were brooding. That meant I found an actual bird sitting on the nest. And so now, if you see a little earlier here, I had 3 eggs, 3 tree swallow eggs. The next time I come back and the tree swallow is brooding. I didn't know how many eggs were on the nest that time, but I didn't want to disturb her because we don't like to touch the birds if we can help it. Sometimes you have to, but if you can avoid touching the birds, it's best that way. And so I figured I'll come back next time and I'll see what's going on. The next time I came back, they were young. So I was in now, normally I don't have to count the young. That's why up here with the Chestnut back chickadees, I didn't have to write anything but just Y because I had young. Well, I don't have to, I needed to count the young here because I knew that I didn't have a good count on the eggs. And so I knew that I had 5 young. Unfortunately, the next week I went back, they were all gone. They should have been there, but they were gone. And that meant that to me, I knew that a snake had probably come in and gotten them. So that's how I'm able to use the week to week cycle to figure out where I should be in the cycle and whether I've got predation or not. So further up here, I got 3 swallows, 3 eggs. The next week, I come back in 3 eggs. And then the next week, I don't have to worry about how many I have. I don't even have to open the nest box if I can hear them calling from inside. A lot of times I'll see the mother or father go in and feed the young, and I'll hear them calling, and I say, oh, I've got young. I just mark it down and I walk on. And then at the end, I come back and the nest box is empty right when I thought it would be. I'm able to say that I had 3 birds fledged. But then you come down here, weeble. A weeble is a western bluebird. And it's the same thing. I just keep track of how many eggs. Eggs are very easy to count. Unfortunately, the young may not be that easy to count because they flop all over each other. Sometimes they have their wing over the other guy's head. And so they can be kind of hard. You have to sit there and count beaks or count bellies, or it's not that easy. So it's just easier to count eggs. So this is something I call Bluebird Math, and it's kind of like a calendar. Okay, so the bluebirds basically lay 1 egg a day, and this is pretty much the same for all these songbird-sized birds. So they lay 1 egg a day, but they don't start incubating right away. They lay the egg, and then they lay the next egg the next day, and they keep laying until they've decided, I've got enough, I need to start brooding. Now, I mentioned to you that they're gambling on what the insect load is going to be like. Well, what if they're not all that confident that there's going to be insects? Maybe they're starting their second brood and they know that they're going to go into the dead of summer. You may only find 2 eggs. You may only find 3. It's because the birds are trying to be circumspect and they don't want to lay too many eggs. So once they lay that last egg, then they're going to start brooding. The reason they start brooding all at once is because then all of those eggs progress at the same time and they will all hatch at the same time. So unlike some other birds like barn owls that actually will start laying they'll start sitting on the eggs as soon as they lay, and they will actually have a staggered hatching. So you go about 2 weeks, and then the birds hatch. I can't believe that it actually works out that way, but it does. So that goes 2 weeks, then they hatch, and then you go 2 weeks, and then you get to it's about 18 days. So this is 14 days. This is 18 days. So you come down here, and the thing is, the reason this is in red is because now they're getting close to fledging. And the reason I have it in red is because when you get close to fledging, the experts will tell you that you don't want to chance having the birds pre-fledge. If they pre-fledge, then you have to go and you open up the nest box and the birds jump out. You have to go chase them down and pick them up and put them back in. Now, honestly, that's never happened to me. But even though I don't really do that, but I want you to know that the experts say that last 4 days, don't open the nest box if you can help it. Okay. So keep track of where in the cycle you are, and you can hopefully, by the time they get down to that point where they're about really close to fledge, they have to be fed a lot. And so that means that the mama bird and the papa bird are going to be going into that box very frequently and within like 10 minutes. So you can sit there and wait for them. A lot of times you'll actually hear them calling from inside if you don't want to open it up. So anyway, that's Bluebird Math. There are a bunch of different tools that you could take. We'll talk about a little bit of them. Obviously, you want to take a hat and snacks, and that's a nice bag. It's got 2 different pouches that Georgette takes with her. The plastic tub is because you never know what you're going to find. In their case, they like to take grass and stuff like that. Sometimes you find a nest that's been really wet, and it's good to be able to replace it. Collecting grass is good to have around. That stuff up in the upper left there, that's called diatomaceous earth. And what diatomaceous earth does is, although it looks like a powder, it's actually little shards of little glass. And so you want to be careful what you do with it around the baby birds. But if you've got ants, it's a good way of treating the area around them where the birds aren't able to get to, but it isn't good for the ants, and the ants will shy away from it. The thing I like about it is that, unlike Tanglefoot, which is another product that people use, which is like grease, if you use diatomaceous earth, it's not quite so hard on the other birds around it. The reason for the cloth there is because if you're afraid that the birds are going to fledge or something like that, and you want to open it up, you can actually stuff the cloth into the hole. The brush is good because when you're cleaning out the nest box, it can get kind of dusty, and you might want to use the brush in order to get it a little bit more. And that little duct taped piece of wire there is what they use in order to they use it actually to cover the side of the nest box so that whatever birds are inside don't fall out or don't try and pre-fledge. Screwdriver for obvious reasons, and the pliers, because sometimes those hooks are not that they don't want to cooperate. They got swollen up or something in the rain. So it's good to have pliers and a screwdriver because screwdrivers used to actually secure the nest box. And then the mirror, which you use to put up into the nest box, especially if like a house wren. It can be hard to figure out where the eggs are. So it's good to have those around. The compass and the gloves and the mask. The mask, even without COVID, it's good to have a mask around because when you're cleaning out that nest box, it get really dusty. So you're not going to stand upwind, and you definitely want to have a mask on. Water, the cell phone, first aid kit, walking stick. Now let's talk about species-specific placement. So you've got obviously the Nuttall's woodpecker. The reason I think that this nest box got that Nuttall's woodpecker is just made of pine. And most of the nest boxes that I know of that are up are not made of pine. And so it's interesting that this particular nest box has been repeated. Now it's been visited, I think, over 3 years in a row by the Nuttall's woodpecker. So, so that's pretty cool, I think. The Western bluebird. So the Western bluebird, when we talk about where to put a nest box, we're talking about habitat, right? And you're talking about what the animal eats, what the bird eats. In this case, you see that whole up in the upper left, all that food. Those are different things that Western bluebirds are known to eat. And so it's good to know that because that's what they're looking for. And if you don't have that stuff around, you're not going to have the birds. So a Western bluebird, when you're putting up a nest box, you're going to want to put it up around 100 feet apart. I've actually seen 100 yards used before, but basically it's kind of a guess that they use. But basically what you're trying to do is to try and keep those territories apart, because what they're worried about is they're worried that if you put them too close together, that somehow they're going to be fighting a lot, I guess. Honestly, I'm not sure I'm worried about that, but I do know one thing, and that is that if you have a lot of food, if you've got an area like the horse pasture that my nest box trail uses, there's so much food that territoriality goes out the window, and they don't bother trying to get everybody away from the other nest boxes. So it has a lot to do with what kind of habitat you have. If it's good habitat, it may not need to be quite so far apart. Now, why does it say 15 feet apart up on the upper left? Well, what that is that's paired boxes. Paired boxes are good because you're not going to have two bluebirds next to each other, but you'll have a bluebird and a swallow. And they'll know to move in. You're not going to have two bluebirds. You're not going to have two swallows, but you may have one or the other. And the cool thing is they'll both defend the other boxes because they don't want any predators anywhere near their box. So if they see something attacking anything near them, they're all going to attack. That's four birds defending the box instead of just two. Look out below. Sometimes they will actually kind of dive bomb you. If that's the case, then just try and stay predictable. They won't hit you unless you get unpredictable and start dodging and stuff like that. This is a Western bluebird nest. Now sometimes they use pine needles. Other times they'll use fine grass. It really depends on what they've got out there. This barnyard grass is what they had available at the time. They have blue eggs. And you notice the little babies here, and notice that blue egg. That's a bad egg, obviously. And at the end, remember I was telling you that at the end, after the birds have fledged, you go back and see what is there. Well, obviously after this nest is complete, that blue egg is still going to be there. And so then you'll say, okay, I know that there were 5 eggs, but I have a bad egg that's been left here. Now I know 4 fledged. And then some birds that are a little bit older. Like I mentioned to you that we don't like to touch the birds. It's a no touch policy if you can help it. Now, well, what happens if the birds are got a horsehair tangled around their foot? Are we not supposed to touch? No, of course. Go and try and save the bird. But if you can help it, don't bother touching them. Tree swallow. Notice around the head, the eye of the tree swallow, and how it's green there. There'll be a test on that later. And then the aquamarine looking sheen on this tree swallow. So tree swallows they will use the same nest boxes as the bluebirds. So if you got bluebirds, a lot of times they're going to alternate with tree swallows or violet green swallows. Now you notice it says water there. That's because tree swallows like to be a little bit more lower elevation. They like to be around water. Ed Levin has 2 different lakes or ponds. I mean, they're not that big. And so they really like that. And so you're going to find tree swallows down at that elevation, whereas further, and then they have these beautiful nests with the white eggs. Notice the feathers, because they're around ducks and geese, they tend to have these big feathers. By the green swallow, and this is where that eye thing comes in. Notice that the other one was aquamarine. This is more of a Kelly green, and around the eye is white. And notice how further down the legs are. I mentioned that when I was talking about the kerfs the other day. So the violet green swallow has literally uses the same nest boxes, but as the western bluebird, they're more upland than the tree swallow. So you don't usually find the tree swallow and the violet green swallow nesting in the same general area. Sometimes they do. I actually have had a violet green swallow nest attempt at 11, but for the most part, it's been tree swallows. And there's a violet green swallow there. Chestnut-back chickadee is the next one. I see that I'm getting toward the end here. Chestnut-back chickadee is the next really common bird. And when I wrote this, I thought that I knew that they liked oak, pine trees, and redwood trees. What I didn't realize is that they're actually pretty much happy with any native tree, or sycamores and many others. Spruce. There's just so many, any conifer for sure. But they actually are happy with a wide variety of native trees. So, but one thing they do like is having that nest box up under the canopy. They like to have that cover overhead. So unlike the western bluebird, which frankly they could be under the canopy, they could be out of the canopy. Same with the tree swallow, but the chestnut-back chickadee, they like to be under the canopy. A beautiful chickadee nest. This is actually raccoon fur. I don't know if they picked it off of a live sleeping raccoon or if they found a roadkill or something. But they will use whatever they found. Sometimes they use redwood fir bark, and sometimes they use skunk fur and really stink up that nest box. They can't smell, so it doesn't matter to them. And one thing about their nests is when you open it up, you're going to say, "Oh, that's a chestnut-back chickadee nest," but it looks like there's no cup, and therefore you say, "Oh, they don't have any eggs." Well, as far as I can tell, as soon as they put that nest in, they tend to lay their eggs. So there are eggs in there, but they're buried. And you want to be very careful if you're going to feel around. That's what I feel around in there, trying to find out how many eggs there are. Georgette says she doesn't like to feel around in there at all. She's really concerned that we're going to destroy the eggs. So just keep all that in mind. Oak titmouse. It's a beautiful gray bird with a crest. That crest is not always up. Sometimes they just look like a gray bird. They're another one that likes to have the nest up underneath the canopy, and they pretty much like oaks. So they're okay with any kind of oak, but it has to be an oak. So they like valley oak, which is deciduous. They like coast live oak, which is an evergreen. And here's like I said, they literally are lying down here and putting that crest down, trying to make themselves as I'm not here as possible. And then here's a house wren. The house wren can be kind of a little rambunctious, and they actually can break eggs of birds in nearby nests. So you have to be really careful with them. So anyway, I'm just gonna go through the rest of these real quick. This is a dummy nest for a house wren. Bewick's wrens are similar. They like thick or scrub areas. White-breasted nuthatch, like I said, likes to be very private, and they like oaks, but they like deciduous oak. So you're gonna find them around mainly valley oak and certain other oaks. The assorted flycatcher is a little bit rarer. That's actually a very smelly nest because they made it with poop. And they like the riparian area. The purple martin I mentioned, so I'm going to leave it there. The northern flicker, that's Lee Pauser's picture. The nest box one. The one up above I found somewhere. And the American kestrel, the Western screech owl, all of these are bigger nest boxes that are needed for these birds. Then the burrowing owl, which is an honorary cavity nester because he does have a cavity, but it's in the ground. And then the bats, which are cavity nesting mammals, and bumblebees, which are cavity nesting insects. Um, and I told you about the resources last week. So, Georgette, did you find any questions? Were you able to get them all? You're still muted, I think.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you. Kristen is interested in how to get a lifter. Now, you did cover the plan and how to make one. Can you buy one ready-made? Is there a source for them?
Well, we don't have, we've been thinking about like building them, maybe getting all the parts and try and make it so that we can actually provide them. So far, pretty much everybody's been kind of on their own. The That pamphlet that Lee put together, he did a really good job of putting together plans for putting together a nest box retriever.
Okay.
And then you can certainly go, I would say, go ahead and write to Carolyn at programs@scvas.org, and she'll try and help you out, one way or another, because we don't want not having a retriever to be the problem, So if they're going to have a trail, then they want to use hanging nest boxes. We'll try and help them get the boxes that are built as hanging. We'll try and help them with a retriever one way or another. Now, I should say that they actually use a hook on a nest box to lift theirs off, which are easy enough when they're so low, because they keep their nest boxes low over at McClellan Ranch. And so what they do is basically go get a swimming pool pole, the type that they use on the net for a swimming pool, and then they actually put just a hook off of the end of it, and then they just lift it up that way. That doesn't work for lifting them up way up high, because the way it works is just really awkward. But lower boxes that are like less than 12 feet or lower, that works just fine. So that's one. So that's a couple different things. You can look for the hook, talk to Carolyn, email her about the idea of getting retriever, and we'll go ahead and see what we can do to help. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
No.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
That was it.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. And so I appreciate everybody. And like I said, if you're interested in taking part, go ahead and notify Carolyn that you are thinking about, whatever it is, whatever you're interested in doing. And we'll try and help you get you set up either with a trail, or help you with finding the materials you need in order to do something in your backyard, or whatever you end up needing to do. All right.